on to module 1, worldview shift.
Okay, so Danielle and I decided to do this, the Resonant Science Foundation with Nassim Haramein. We did, like, they offered a couple days ago, whatever, I don't know when you guys are watching this, but they offered to do their first module that's been out for a little while, to give it to everybody for free. And we both have wanted to do it for a while, but this is like, what, free? Yes, okay. And so it's about it's a detailed course about figuring out their unified theory, their unified physics theory. So that's what field theory. And it's broken into 6 parts, and we did the first like chapter part, which was kind of long, but whatever, we did it together. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, you're right. It's unified physics theory. But anyway, the field is another term from another area. It's funny how there are different, like I follow, okay, let's say for example, I follow Joe Dispenza and this meditation practice, I guess, and the unified field is what is talked about. And essentially it's unified physics in a sense. So then it's funny how unified physics is maybe the larger name, but then okay, so they all connect to each other. So if you were in music, and then you can have your own unified field, let's say, or any of the background, biology or meditation or whatever. So each area, or physics, now physics is the whole, but it has its each sustaining like division of that. But it's all crossed over because it's one unified physics.
Yeah, well, and I liked how, like, at some point in the module they talk about how this isn't even a new concept. This is how it used to be until like the early 20th century, where we took this out. But I mean, in China it's called like chi, or in Japan kai, like prana, in India like life force, or in Star Wars it's called the force. You know, I mean, or the ether or something. Basically it's like there is something that binds everything.
Right.
That's essentially what it boils down to. Like there is some instead of it's just being randomized parts, there's, you know, we're a part of a whole.
Right, we're all part of the whole. And well, and let's step back also to the, I guess that's the overview of it. And then the worldview was the first module of this unified physics theory.
Right, which goes into like disconnected worldviews and their connected worldviews. So it's kind of just separating what we currently take as the paradigm narrative that the collective is buying versus an alternative view of how to look at things.
Right, exactly. And I felt really connected to that one. Just hearing it from the beginning, I was thinking, of course, automatically you start thinking about what your own worldview is and where you get your worldview and where does that come from initially, and how, of course, it varies from cultures, but also individually. If you're born into a family and you get your family member's worldview, that has an influence on you, your religion, of course, your schooling. And so all of these things form your worldview. And you can see how many different people have different types of worldviews, even within one culture, but then there's the cultural or the societal worldview that's influencing you too. But you're also influencing it. But anyway, it's back and forth. That really made me think for a while.
Yeah, and I for me, it definitely, it's really nice that, so like in college, I remember I was in I took like 4 semesters of astronomy, and I was in my 4th semester of astronomy, and they were talking about like the entropy of the universe and about how, you know, how basically everything's expanding and it's all just gonna like get so far apart that it just fizzles out and like burns up and dies, and like that's it, that's the end of the universe, that's how it works, and we're all on an inevitable path towards this entropy. And like I remember just like my heart just sunk, and I was like, how do you know that? Like, and the thing, and like when you would start looking at the instruments that they use to measure it or how they calculate that, I'm kind of going like that. First of all, if we've been around for however many billions or trillions of whatever, you don't even know how much time we have, like your your small little snippet of how long we've been recording is nothing. It's nothing.
Exactly.
And
so if it's a constant expansion, how do you really know at one point that it doesn't just turn around?
You don't even know if it's a swell, if it goes in and out, in and out. And and then the other thing is that, like, from our limited perspective on this one point, like, it's very hard to tell, like,
what's happening,
what's actually really happening. Yeah, we just figured out, like, they have a new theory on how big the Milky Way galaxy is. Like, literally last week they came up with that. So you're telling me we just found the edge of the Milky Way, and you're going to tell me how every star that you see in the sky, how the entire universe, every galaxy in it, how it's going to end?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the disconnected worldview. That's the old paradigm, like you're saying. But now with the unified worldview, it has a different perspective. That's not necessarily the case. It's changing your perspective of the worldview again. But go ahead.
I actually took a screenshot of the bullet points of the disconnected and the connected. So, like, I was going to read those because I think that's kind of important to distinguish.
Yes.
Up front here.
Right.
Let me see. But you could talk about something else. It's going to take me a second to find this.
Well, I think, I'm not sure if it's exactly what you have, but the non-living, the old worldview also was that it's a non-living universe, which I thought is crazy. I was like, wow, what is that? So people think, what, there's a non-living universe? I'm not really sure. And then I just
like I told you, like, my older brother thinks I'm crazy for thinking that the Earth is a living being. He's like,
right. And so before it was that that consciousness came after, that it was created and then consciousness. But with this worldview, this interconnected worldview is that actually the consciousness was the creator of everything else that there is. And then that is constantly receiving feedback as well and being influenced. So it's a two-way communication, but there was always a consciousness in it. So it's therefore always living.
Okay, so this is our current dominant. Okay, so let me just read the disconnected versus the connected worldviews. So, okay, for the sake of simplicity, we call these two lenses the disconnected worldview, the current dominant one, and the connected worldview, which is the emerging one. And here's an overview for comparison. The disconnected worldview, the current dominant worldview in science, can be characterized as: 1, the universe and all material objects within it behave like a machine. Okay, that is sort of how we look at it all. 2, the analysis of this machine is through successive reduction and its components into smaller and smaller parts. Okay, and then 3, there is no underlying organizing framework, therefore there's no need to consider one within the fundamental model of physics. And I think we can get into that, like, in terms of that. I think that's a lot of scientists don't even want to explore the nature of what consciousness is and all that. Anyway, 4, the process of organization within the universe is solely through random events and interactions. 5, there is no innate intelligence or life within inorganic matter, making it essentially a dead universe. Mm-hmm. And then 6, the direction of evolving systems is always towards decreasing order and dissolution, so entropy. And then 7, objects are separated by empty space and therefore inherently disconnected. And then the last one is the vacuum of space is void of energy. So, like, these are current things that we believe right now, like, as, like, that's just how it is, and there's no arguing with it. That is what is fact. But then and for me, none of that has ever sat completely well. I mean, I do see that you can break everything into parts, yes, but to what level?
Right. And also the old worldview, it started with the parts and then started with the parts, but now the emerging worldview starts with the whole, and then to the parts.
Well, and I do think that the whole entire religion component into science and all that it messed us up. It got us really fuzzy, and people, I think, we have on a complete pushback from like, no, there cannot be like a connecting framework or an intelligent design, because that means there's God, and I hate God, and that doesn't work. And I think the like the what do you call it, like the abuse of power within religious systems into the sciences, and how they treated scientists, like killing like Bruno and Galileo and all these things. That stuff put such a bad taste in people's mouths that they like completely pushed off into being like so far from the other way that it's a little interesting. Yeah.
But the unified theory again also talks about how it can still be provable. They're not separate. That's the thing I really like about it too. One of the things, but it doesn't have to be. They're not separate at all, because it's still using science to show I don't know, to show connections, and to. It's not like it's devoid of science, so it doesn't have to be a fundamentalist one way or the other.
Right.
There's definitely a middle ground. That's what this is about.
This is what this is about. Well, and so then like the connected viewpoint worldview that this course is more like going to go into and talking about is the emerging viewpoint in science can be characterized as the universe and all matter/energy it comprises behave as a unified whole system. Analysis is through understanding the fundamental patterns of wholeness that are systematically expressed in fractal representations at all scales. Fractal repetition at all scales. The information/energy interaction is holographic throughout, which honestly, because I read that holographic field theory by Michael Talbot, I understood a lot better. But had I not read that, I don't think I would have quite understood the analogy of the holographic thing.
Yeah, because I get the fractals a lot, because I always think about life in terms of fractals. But the holographic, I've read a little bit like long time ago, but not enough that I would understand it. Not enough that I did understand it.
David Bohm, the guy they talk about in this either, he was a physicist contemporary of Einstein's, and he basically, the holographic theory is that in a hologram, which is a laser printed photograph or whatever, if you take if you cut any piece of the thing off, the whole, like you could still, like, let's say
the same
let's say the picture was of the Empire State Building, okay, and then you took a square out of the top, like right corner of this picture. Well, if you bend it over, there's still going to be, in this little thing, you're still going to see an Empire State Building. So it's like every part of the whole, or every part has the whole within it. So and it's kind of like it's like the way that the holographic universe is saying is that it's basically like we're one thing interconnected in all these infinite amount of ways that we don't even understand, but it is a hologram in that sense. So I don't know if I'm explaining that correct or not, but
well, I think so, and that can still work with the fractal idea, because it just is, it's almost like an infinite hologram,
right? Which, I mean, some people take to mean, oh, this is it's just an illusion, it's not real, and I guess in some ways you could make that argument, but at the same time, if it's real to you, it's real. That's fine, it's real. It's just that it's manipulatable in other ways that we haven't explored completely. And I think a lot of it we haven't explored completely because of our worldview, because of the way in which we've decided this is what can be happening and nothing else. Okay, so let me get right back to the other couple. There's a couple more points. The process of organization includes an inherent feedback feed-forward loop throughout the fractal and the holographic matrix. So, okay. And then this feedback exists an ever-evolving reflexive intelligence through the entire micro and macro cosmic system. So it's a living universe. And then the direction of evolving systems includes a balance between both increasing and decreasing order. So not entropy, but syntropy, where there is like a give and a take, which completely is like what our rebirth is. Like we're born, we die, we're born again,
Right.
and then the last one is the space between objects is full of a vast energy potential that seems to connect all things. So the ether versus a vacuum of space. So anyway, those are the two differences of the disconnected worldview and the connected worldview. And so this entire thing is trying to argue for the connected worldview. So that's what this is about. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, can we talk about, do you want to go through the module, like each section, which I didn't think so. I actually just picked out some points that stood out to me.
I just wrote stuff that was like, yeah, to me.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff that stood out to me. The Elizabeth Sahtouris woman, who, the biologist, she's an evolution biologist. I really enjoyed her commentaries, and I'd like to explore her more, because one of the things she said that stood out for me was, well, actually two things, but she talks about how in biology there was this juvenile stage. I don't know, that's a little bit later on maybe, but how there's this juvenile stage in biology where everything is creative, and but at the same time it's kind of aggressive and very competitive. And so in biology, if you look at the evolution of, let's say, a plant, then you could find at some point in its evolution that it was in this juvenile period and it was very competitive. But at some point there's like a point of diminishing returns where to be competitive is no longer good for anybody, right. And then it has to be collaborative, and then that's when it becomes success. Yeah, then it has to be cooperative, right? And then it is successful. And so she's saying like there are parts in our human lives that you could see this type of success where we're coming together and we've evolved and maybe we're past the juvenile stage, but that's what we're emerging from right now. We're emerging from this very this worldview of competition, and maybe again going back to Darwinian or Newtonian worldview, but now we're switching over to this more integrated worldview.
And we have built our systems up to a point where we're completely our own islands everywhere, but taking all the resources and everything, and it's at a breaking point. And she's like, and now like collaboration like in order to survive as a species, we are going to have to collaborate. Like that's like the next like that's where we're at. Step. That's and even Nassim says that. He says that we're at our adolescence and we need to start growing.
We're emerging adults.
We're emerging adults.
Yeah, that's the evolution of it. And now we're getting into the cosmic consciousness of it, and the I don't know, the interdimensional aspect, and that's where we're emerging from. I love it. I love all this stuff. This is
great. I'm so glad we did this course. I have a crush on Nassim Haramein, by the way. He's so hot. I don't know why.
I like this Elizabeth Sahtouris woman.
Like,
She's the one that I was just like,
yeah, I'm like, yeah. Anyway,
Classic, definitely. World shift from separating to rejoining. Oh, that was another thing. This Dwayne Elgin mentions in one of the videos that there's a world shift from this separating perspective to this rejoining, and that's the coming home. That it doesn't have to. It's like we know it in our deepest selves, but now we're rejoining, and that's what it is like. And I don't know, that also stood with me. Yeah.
Well, like, and this is like, I have written down my notes. I don't know if it was him or not who said it, but it was like the whole divide and conquer thing about how where we see this random universe with no underlying organizing framework that is eventually heading towards a disorder and is like a dead machine, which can be studied by taking it apart. And then if it is our belief that nature and everything in the universe are inevitably on the degrading slope of entropy, then our society will eventually reflect this particular worldview and decline in a similar manner. So like that's the thing. If we really want to go with that narrative, then Yeah.
So if you're saying if we don't switch worldviews, then we're just going to kind of
Then
decline
we will, yeah, because like it's you're doing you're perpetuating your own future. What is that called? You're prophesizing your own future.
It's right, like you're
what is that? There's some word for that. That your brain's just like not telling me right now.
Yeah, you're creating, I don't know, but I see what you're saying. Like you're creating your destiny type of thing. You're living it. Right. You're living your destiny. You're, I mean, like you've created, anyway, you all know.
And you guys know what I'm talking about, but like today I've had a couple of those where I was like, what? There's a very common thing that the people know, and I cannot think of the word for it, but.
Oh yeah, that happens to me all the time.
And then this one's like, if you can visualize it, we can create it. And so when you take that in the verse, it's like, what you can visualize, we can create. You know,
yes,
like someone was saying, and I do feel,
and then that's in the field. You feel like what? Like when you visualize it, you can create it. Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, like that's why some people like poo-poo sci-fi in general, and I'm like, no, like
we're living it.
Like not only are we living it, but like we're living beyond it. Like everything that was in like Star Trek in the 1950s, like beam me up, Scotty, or talk, like doors that open like this. I mean, all these things were not in existence at that time. And
right,
like you put ideas into the future of things that become possible, and then we do them. It's amazing. Like
I always think that, well, I do think that, but then I also think this would probably work with that worldview, with the unified theory kind of, because sometimes I think, well, were those people able to, the people who came up with these scripts and whatever, or these sci-fi books or ideas, were they just able to tap into the field and pick up that information from the future and bring it back and write about it? So it's so connected that there's really no before or after.
Well, like that's the feedback feed forward loop.
Yes.
Like yeah, and I do think that a lot of like creative people, because that's the thing, like when you think about what is creativity and like where does it come from, and I know from my own personal view, when I've had bouts of things, like a lot of my creative ideas, and I'm a super creative person, like my stuff comes to me, like pops into my head from somewhere else. It's not like I like sat there and worked it out like a math project. It's like, it's more like you just get inspired and things come to you via just instantly in full form. So I think
this point was talked about. Do you remember this? This was talked about in this
Yeah,
series.
I do. Well, yeah. Let's see. What notes did I take?
There were like 3 ways that a person would be creative.
Well, I do remember Rupert Sheldrake was talking about about within the morphic field, which Rupert Sheldrake is actually a really fascinating character.
Yes.
There is so the notes I took on him is it's like there's memory in this morphic field, and the morphic field is like a invisible, some sort of energetic field around living organisms, and or it's maybe everything. He's like all fields are measured through their effects, and they're all invisible, which is a good point, because they're like, well, how do you know this morphic field exists? Well, how do you know anything exists? Like you can't see gravity, you can't see magnetism.
We only measure by its effects.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And so he thinks that there's memory in nature, and that it exists until it's retrieved, and that for the most part it is habitual, but memory is a relationship in time, and so the resonance with spatial distinguishes possible waves. Okay, and then he says we have creativity and habit in this morphic field. That's interesting. And leaps of creation are by
there were 3 ways,
by experimentation within consciousness.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, but and then they kind of talked about the like where is memory stored, and is it in this field, or is that what the Akashic record is, or is what is it? I don't know, but that's really that was really fascinating.
Well, then he mentions about the Akashic record that that's not really it, because then a lot of people think of it as a place. Well, where is this Akashic record? Is it in this ether field? And he was saying that no, it's beyond that. Or my understanding was that it was beyond that. It wasn't. It was just like existed. I don't know,
because I think he was just saying that because there's a relationship to the field and the point in time, which needs to be like basically something expressed out of it. So it's not like a like encyclopedia of records somewhere. It's more like certain things will I guess like, well, like if you take it like as if a computer, it's like you can, it's stuff that's stored in your hard drive that can be pulled up when it needs to be, but it's actually that is the same kind of thing as an Akashic record. I don't know how the distinguishing factors of those two things are, but
well, this is in some of the field, the quantum field study that Joe Dispenza talks about, is that if you go into this quantum field, and then let's say you have a thought about something, and when that meets with the feeling, it collapses into existence. So I mean, in that sense, it didn't get into that part about the feeling, but like, let's say to manifest something or for something to happen, then it would be your thought meeting the vibration of the feeling, and within that, then that collapses into maybe not a particle, I guess a particle at that point, because it was the waves collapsing into a particle, and that would create the existence of it in maybe in the third dimension, or in this physical.
Well, and this wasn't in this particular module, but like we talked about this last time we talked on the phone in terms of like if time is not real, and all points are happening, every point from the future and every point from the past is all happening now, or it's, I mean, we're just experiencing this now, right now. But if it's all, if time is just an illusion of this particular instrument at this time, then like perhaps like a hologram, like it's everywhere all the time anyway. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but you know,
right. Well, that makes sense to me. I mean, I guess
it makes sense to me too.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, but I don't know. I think it's just something that you think of. It's funny because I was trying to explain this a little bit about what I was watching with Sabino and Pedro, and I was telling them, I said, you know, when I can't explain something, it means I really don't understand it yet. But at the same time, there's a feeling that I just know that that's what it is. Like, and then it's like, oh yeah, I already knew that. But then I actually can't explain it, or to a certain level. But anyway, I feel that about the holographic universe, and how what you're saying, it's just always there, because it's, you know, and that again makes sense to me. I don't know if that's explicable in some way by someone. But
well, and it's like part of me also has this thing where things are much clearer in my head than I can articulate out of my mouth. Yes, and a lot of it too is like I don't
telepathy already.
Yeah, we do need telepathy. And also I kind of always have you know, you have like really critical people in your life who like I sometimes always imagine explaining it to them, and I get tied up with that because I'm just like, or like I have like, I'll get like, ooh, I'm not the authority on this subject, so I feel like maybe like it's not my place to explain it. But then like part of me also goes, well, it doesn't matter if I'm the authority on this, not if I'm not the authority on this, by all means school me here more. Right. That's great. I'm totally open to more conversation about it. But and if I'm not the authority, like still I may be giving people, or we may be giving people, but I should be talking about this stuff and maybe giving them new food for thought that they hadn't really considered before, which is like, cool, you go look at it further and figure out something more. Like if this is something that resonates with you, sweet.
Right. Right. Yeah. If it's just not you die and go to heaven, maybe there's something else beyond that. Then hopefully you can investigate something, you know, never stop learning.
Oh, I really liked this, the Rubik's Cube analogy. I actually took I think that was the Buckminster Fuller, or actually I'm not sure who did that one. Hold on. I took a screenshot of that one to read. Well, this was like David Bohm did say this: man's general way of thinking of the totality, i.e. his general worldview, is crucial for overall order of the human mind itself. If he thinks it is the totality as constituted of independent fragments, then that is how the mind will tend to operate. But if he can include everything coherently and harmoniously in an overall whole that is undivided, unbroken, and without border, for every border is a division of break, then his mind will tend to move in a similar way. From this will flow an orderly action within the whole world. Yeah, so that's basically what the holographic, that's what
That's described.
the definition of what the holographic is. Okay.
There was something I was thinking of. Oh, going back to not being able to explain things that you have in your head, and of course maybe that's the link to telepathy, but if it's already there, then if it's been done once, of course it can be done again, especially more easily. But excuse me, it goes to the holographic universe, the 100 monkey idea again, because it's like, well, at some point you just pick up that wave, and you've felt it, you know it, or you integrate it. So it's like, well, those people have learned it and have explained it, and at some point you can tap in and receive that information. I think that's the direction that we're all going, if we're open to that. But again, I suppose that is a worldview, but that's something that that's something that I think.
So in regards to the feedback feed forward loop, this was illustrated by, this guy, so this was from a 1997 paper of a research of an English astronomer, a physicist named Fred Hoyle, who basically coined the term Big Bang, and later went on to challenge the entire concept in favor of a steady state model. But anyway, this is his example. So, no example gives a better mathematical perspective of the implicate universe order than the one given by Fred Hoyle. Hoyle calculated that the probability of a blind person ordering the scrambled faces of a Rubik's Cube. The calculations demonstrate that due to the fact that the blind person does not know if he or she is getting closer or further from the object on each move, the probabilities of matching the 6 colors on each face of the cube are in the order of 1 to 1 in like 5 times 1,018 or whatever. It's like crazy number. Thus, if the person were to labor at a rate of 1 move per second, it would take 5 times 10 to the 18th seconds to complete all probabilities. That is to say that it would take up to 126 billion years for that person to reach the goal. Clearly, that time period not only grossly exceeds the life expectancy of the Rubik's Cube player, but once again, it exceeds the lifetime of the Earth, or for that matter, the existence of the universe since its beginning, which has been estimated at a maximum of 20 billion years old. However, if the blind person is given a piece of information, a feedback, say yes or no every time that a move is made, which is every second, then the time needed to complete the Rubik's Cube equation would drastically reduce to approximately 2 minutes.
Right.
So that's
so cool.
So yeah, so basically, if there's no feedback loop within the system and it's just a dead universe, if there was no feedback loop, then it would take a blind person 126 billion years to complete a Rubik's Cube. But if you gave them a feedback loop, it would take them 2 minutes. Like that for me was like a really good example where I was like, oh, okay, I get what it's saying.
About the feedback, yeah. And I like, there was some talk about the universe, let's say, as the consciousness kind of top down versus bottom up. So is it always top down? But again, no, it's not, because you as an individual or as parts are giving feedback to the whole universe, which is also receiving information from us. So it is a two-way, it is a two-way relationship. It's not constantly top down. I love that.
Which I think also goes into entropy and centric, or I think things ebb and flow. Like I think like we're giving information to the macro and to the micro.
Right.
Exactly. I found this to be interesting. That I don't know if you picked up on this one, but the tensile strength of the breaking point of steel.
Oh yes, I wrote that too. I
thought that was cool.
Love that one.
Yeah. So the atomic parts of all the elements that add up into making steel, like the copper, the nickel, the whatever. When you add all those together, it's like 260,000 pressure points, or PSI. But instead, when they all get together, the sum of all the parts is greater than so the sum of the parts is greater than and unpredictable of the whole. So what actually ends up happening with steel is that its tensile strength, its breaking point is 350,000 psi, which is
Right.
almost 100,000 more than when they're
And
individually added up together. And they don't know why that happens. They don't know how that happens.
Right, and that's explained as synergy. That's the synergy is the behavior of the whole systems unpredicted by the behavior of their parts taken separately. So that was right. There's some of the parts being way more than individual adding up component of it. That is interesting.
Well, and then that goes into like, you know, the unpredictability of like light can be a particle and a wave, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's context dependent, which David Bohm
Mm-hmm.
talks about, which I thought was really,
Right.
really cool. Yeah, so anyway, this stuff was amazing and
Yes.
wonderful. But
yeah, and there's so much more to get into.
I know there's so much more to get into. The thing that I really liked the best was, we talked about earlier, but like we'll talk about it here, was that Elizabeth Satorius, she says that where there's room for growth and all of this, like with this new connected worldview and everything, is the science of economics, an economy that actually works. She's like, that's something that we do not currently, and we, as we can see, do not currently have that. Complete socialism and complete like capitalism, either way, don't work for everyone.
Yeah, a new system that would be, that has to be a win for everybody. That she said that has to be foremost, that was like the number one thing that had to change. That was my understanding.
Yeah.
The other thing, I liked her, the last thing, one of the last, last module that she said with the conclusion was, and remember to have fun. And she was just talking about just enjoying what you're doing. She was so lively. I really enjoyed listening to her. Yeah, she was cool. I liked her a lot. And also it was nice to see, it was breathtaking to see a woman in science who had done a lot of groundbreaking work through her career, and that how she left science during, midlife, and was going to just drop it all together. And then she picked it up again because she had such an interest, and then took on this like a whole new way of the worldview. And she started with that. That was pretty cool. So,
yeah, I really
liked her as a scientist.
So yeah, I mean that's basically, I mean, like, well, did you have any other things?
Oh, well, yeah, the implications of a connected worldview. That was the harmonious relationships, and then there were 3 examples, but of course the possibilities are endless. And the point was showing the possibilities of what can become of this connected worldview, which is energy generation. There's a shift from limited resource to free energy or unlimited resources, because right now we're in the limited resources and fight for the resources worldview as a whole. But if we shift to energy generation, then that's changing the outcome to unlimited resources. And then there was the gravitational control, interdimensional travel,
right?
These were all possibilities.
Which is interesting, because it's like, and we know that with the energy generation, like they even mention people within this, like, Nikola Tesla or Royal Rife or William Wright, all these people. Like, I like wrote down a huge list of people that they were talking about, who, Harry Hoxsey, or like there's all these things that all these people who had these energy things that
inventions,
or take it. They were in conflict with the current narrative, so they were kind of taken out and like poo-pooed on. So same thing with the gravitational control. It's like we said earlier, if you like this whole UFO thing and everything, how if you can imagine it, it can become true. But also, like I think we talked about this a couple of times ago, where that Salvador Pais, which I don't even know if it's a real person or not, but that they put out in January, they put out a patent for anti-gravity machine within the US patent office or whatever. So like there's actual, these things are realities that are going to be coming out. And I think that that's going to that could change everything overnight.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting about the whole patent thing because
which I don't actually believe in patents in the end.
Neither do I, because it should just be open source for everyone. Really, well, that's another direction.
That is another direction.
Change of economics, change of worldview.
Well, yeah. And like that, remember I wrote about that in my Mars declaration, is that like we have to get over this, we build our society on credit. Like, you know, you have to get credit for this and credit for that. And we get real upset and real disenfranchised when we aren't given proper credit. And I think and it's hard for me to preach this, because it's like, you can't be like, okay, well, you know, we're all one anyway, and it's a morphic field with all this. It's not really your idea anyway. You're just pulling it from the cosmos. So, you know, just give it to everybody if you're the one who could pull it. Like, yeah,
even though you worked so hard on this.
Even though you worked so hard on that, just go live penniless and eat a turnip. You'll be fine.
Yeah, like, but we all have it.
I'm not really saying that, even though I am, in a way. But I do feel like there needs to be, like, if we were able to like openly collaborate with each other from ground zero all the way up, we would get so much further than we do. Like, one person is not an island. Even if you are a genius, like, you still, like, within your building of your structure, or within your system of thought, it can be improved along the way. Like, just, it can be. That's why I thought it was interesting. Like, Richard Branson had this thing about, he was like, oh, share every business idea you have with everybody. He's like, 99.99999% of the population isn't going to steal it or do anything with it. But every single person that you do, it gives you feedback on a way in which you can improve it. He's like, he's like, I don't believe in being secretive about my new ideas. I share them shout them from the rooftop.
Yeah.
I think
that's an interesting perspective. Yeah. That's great.
That's how Richard.
And also I was just listening to this short audio with some of my people that I work with, and it was about, should there be a salary cap on the amount of money a person can make in a year or whatever, and so it was just a discussion whether or not that should be. And so basically, in the end, a lot of people decided that there shouldn't just be a disparity, is what it comes down to. Because one of the things that you mentioned that was like, well, if, let's say, a person founded a product and had the idea for a product and was completely innovative, changed direction, changed their industry. But on the other hand, they couldn't build it alone. They couldn't market it alone. They couldn't do it alone, really, even though they had the idea for it and maybe got all the plans for it. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't get like a certain credit for it. And this was more in the context of like amount of earnings. Should they earn like billions more than a person in a company that doesn't make enough money to feed their family? So it was more about disparity, and that goes back to changing the economics. But at the same time, it's, you know, we're all egotistical, and maybe to a degree, because we're human, that we want credit and we want people to recognize us. But like, at what cost? Or maybe we just need to recognize everybody's gifts and everybody's contributions as worthy.
But that's what we're even seeing right now. It's like, I so appreciate the people who work at the grocery store and like stock. Like you're getting to see, like, look, all these things that we've always like looked down on forever are essential. They're essential for our survival. And the whole entire notion of like, I do this and I'm smarter, and like I was born with a higher IQ, so I had the ability to, and the right financial things, and all the stars aligned so that I could become like this brain surgeon or something. I deserve X more than, I don't know. I mean, like, it's hard. It's really, really a hard thing to tackle. I have thought about like doing markup percentage caps. So for instance, like, let's say a Buterol or some, like, or whatever, like what was the EpiPen? Okay, the EpiPen, like the research and development has been bought and paid for that like a long time ago. Like that came out 50 years ago or something. I don't know how many years ago, but and they took away the generic drugs for it or something. They just spiked the price to where the EpiPen used to cost like whatever, like $5, and then it costs $100. And every person with like a peanut allergy, which is a ton of people, like have to have these on hand at all time or they will die. So it's an essential thing that they have to have. But like when the company realized that, oh, like they had a monopoly on this drug, they spiked the prices. Well, I like, some part of me thinks that like there should be certain things. It should be like a resource thing where it's like, okay, how much actual resource, like base material went into this product? How you can also calculate in research and development, like how much went to deforming this or whatever. And then you put like an actual percentage of how much profit you can make on it. Maybe like, I mean, you still could sell so much of them or whatever, like your profit.
Right. You could still make a profit.
You can still make a profit. I'm just saying like there should be a cap on maybe the amount you could charge for it.
Yeah. Well, that's a definitely a possible solution.
But then that comes into the whole entire other thing that like I don't like, which is I don't like control systems in general. Like I don't like people to tell me like who's going to monitor that. Who's gonna sit there and say like who can and who can't do that?
Well, hopefully people have enough ethics. I suppose that's what it will have to get down to, that people will just be doing that because they want to do that and not have it inaccessible, and there won't be the desire for price gouging on people's health type of thing. Well, I think it's Japan, but I'm not sure what the price is, what the percentage difference is, but I understand that the CEOs of their company can only make X amount percentage times more their lowest paid employee. So whatever that difference is, whenever that CEO gets a salary increase, so does the person on the bottom.
I mean, I think that's like a really cool, but here's the thing is like, I think that's a really cool system to have within a company. And I wouldn't mind being a CEO or an employee of a company like that and like putting that into my company. But again, I don't want an overarching enforcing government to tell me what I can and can't do anywhere. Like that's the problem. That's the main issue with everything is like, I also kind of feel like I'm besides communal roads, like, I don't know what we need giant governments for. Like, we do not need to have countries, and we do not need to have wars, and we do not need to have all these things. Like, I know that's really radical, but they don't serve us. Agree. What individually serves us is like what, functions within your own active little community that you live and work and breathe it within. And then like I said, like highway systems. That's something the federal government should pay for.
I think maybe we'll go in that direction if we can get into smaller communities, like smaller pockets. That's a possibility for the future. So I don't know. Who knows? Especially if we're just fractals, then maybe we're just all in giant spheres. Wait, there was something I don't remember. I was gonna ask.
It's weird because it's like on psychedelics, I have seen the like energy threads that connect everything, and I've seen how weird stuff fractals. It really like, and by fractals I mean I literally mean like
pixels, like
those Fibonacci sequences, like the Fibonacci like spirals, like things will start fractaling out like that and then start making all these weird geometric patterns, and you're kind of going like, and it just makes you think like, oh, well, wow, maybe my instrumentation is being opened up to other wavelengths that I normally am not able to perceive. But now it's like another way of making the instrumentation work in a different,
That's the purpose of them.
It is, but it just makes you kind of go, whatever this is, whatever this thought experiment is, or whatever our existence in general is, we we don't know. Like we are not being given any information about it. So, and maybe that's part of the game, is to try to self-figure it out or something. I don't know, but
and also, can we ever really figure it out? You know, and if we're always
not
creating
completely.
it, no,
That's true. If you are
yeah.
always creating it, and that's the other thing, is that like I, even with modern day science, I would be just so much better off with it if it would just be a little bit more humble in its use of language. Meaning like
Oh, like everything's so absolute all the time.
yes, everything's so absolute, and now we understand this. And that's what it is.
Yes.
And
We
you're
figured
like,
it out. That's it. End of story.
yeah.
Buck stops here.
Next question. Yeah.
Got that one, check. And as if it's stagnant, as if it will always, even if that is correct. First of all, it's only correct within the context of the way it's being looked at. Again, the worldview. And then the other thing is like, it's if everything is constantly evolving or changing, or the observer is changing it, then maybe it's correct this year, but in 100,000 years, it's not the same.
Yeah, I mean, like it may be, whatever, it may be correct based on the information that you have available at this time, but like there will always be additional information.
Yes,
just will be, and
right.
yeah, and like
and also different perception. Yeah,
and I also think about this a lot in terms of, like, Benjamin Franklin was alive not that long ago, and he discovered electricity. Okay, that's like a huge thing that's part of our everyday life now, but that was like 200 years ago, or 200 or whatever. What was that, 250 or 275
something? Yeah.
I don't know, like whatever. Like there's like, what if there's an electricity right in front of our faces, like something like electricity, like an entire thing that we don't even know about yet? And there is.
Yeah.
There has to be.
Has to be. There always is going to be. Yeah. Well, I think the point was mentioned actually in like all the different fields. Did you watch the video with Deepak Chopra? Speaking of,
yes, I love that, with the revert sheldrake. Yep. All right.
Yes.
Like that was the morphic field that they was
right. The morphic field and all the different fields. So,
but we don't know how many of these exist. Like what, like.
Well, I would guess that they're infinite or constantly changing anyway, because everything is infinite. I don't know.
Well, and then that makes me think, like, and we poo-poo. I hate saying that word. I got to come up with a different word besides that. Anyway, we always kind of like scuff our nose at like dreams. Oh, that's just your brain processing the days, whatever. We don't really understand what happens to a third of your life that you're unconscious for. So and some people don't dream, and if they do dream, it's about your relationship to your father, or like some whatever it is, they're Freudian and stuff or whatever. Okay, but there is I think there's something to like other realms and stuff, like those dimensions, or whatever you want to call them, those could be as real as this.
Well, it goes back to that poem of I dreamt that I was a butterfly, but then I woke up. How do I know if the butterfly wasn't dreaming that it was me?
It was me.
Yeah.
So
how do you know that you're not the butterfly dreaming that you're a person, or are you the person dreaming a butterfly? You don't really know. You don't really know. I mean, the whole thing is maybe the dreaming world is the real thing, and that the waking world is actually the dream.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, like the psychedelic trip I took, not this ayahuasca one, but the one, the mushroom one, it was like, that felt like I lived in that longer than I've lived here.
Wow, that's interesting time.
Yeah, it was only 4 hours long, but I still feel like that was a longer lifetime than what my 37 years so far here. Like, that's weird that something like some little mushroom can do that to you. Like, what is that?
Right. Well, it's a plant medicine. It's a conscious thing. It's a conscious being that there's been plant medicines from shamans and traditions all over the world. I mean, for so much time that, yeah, I think that that's the beauty of it. That's the gift of the plant.
So I have, in my, dreamland, like there's this like way of flying, and like I've gotten to see the suit up close, and it is like little tiny cones, like these little rod cones that are magnetic, and
Oh yes,
they're like nano. It's basically like nano magnetic cones that kind of emulate bug wings. Like when you see how bug wings actually like vibrate off of each other, I think it's some form of magnetism that's used with that. Anyway, in my dream, like when I would fly, like I just would think that like I was just flying in my dream. And then like recently I like asked somebody in the dream, I was like, well, how does this actually work? How is this working? And they're like, well, it's a technology. And I was like, well, how? And then they showed me how the clothing that we would wear had the ability for us to basically, like, for you could I don't know how you turn it on, but like we were working against the ions in the air with these magnetisms, and that's how you're flying everywhere. And I'm thinking, if I could dream that could be possible in real life someday.
Well,
Like
so
I think that's a science that would exist. Like I personally am not the one to do it, but I'm just saying, like there are things like electricity that are there. You just don't know about them yet.
Well, maybe when you're dreaming, you're going into a different time of, like a future or something, or
Could be
also another dimension. But yeah, until you're
because
getting
even your dream is still part of the hologram, because you're
right. Yeah. At what point would you ever leave the hologram?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't think you would be able to. But I mean, that kind of scary too. You're like, wait, I'm never gonna leave this hologram. But where would you go to another galaxy?
I mean, how many holograms are there?
And are they individual holograms? It's all part of the biggest hologram. I guess if it's a fractal, it's constant. Like
and
it's
we are all connected in a circle in a hoop that never ends.
Oh my gosh. Wait, I wanted to ask you. Oh, well, I want to ask you, how's your story coming? Your writing story, but in a minute. But first, I wanted to go back to the worldview thing, because like when I first started listening to this this chapter, I was thinking of what I had studied in graduate school with intercultural relations, and one of the first things that we looked at was worldview in terms of our identity. Like, who are we? What do you define yourself as? Like, where does that come from? How is that different from, like, how you perceive yourself? Is that different from the way others perceive you? So does that make you different from the way you perceive yourself? So does that is actually your definition of who you are really who you are? Because if other people see you a different way, then there's the question of, well, it's incomplete, your own perspective. And so this whole worldview thing, it goes back to the subjectivity of nothing ever really being objective. So right, so even I don't know, I guess just our
I mean, because like when they went
back
to like kids in Iran or when Elizabeth was talking to the people in Iran, because she was saying that they do have a connected worldview, more or less, and that they think that there's a connectivity, and like the Westerners, there's no connectivity. And like someplace like India, they've always thought that like prana and the Akashic record, and like that there is ether. They've always believed in the concept of ether, and that's always been applied within their sciences. Well, so that's where she's kind of going, like, where you really can, the economic sciences is where you guys can really make this all work. Then that's where you can bring it all together, because that's where we've both, like, all systems have failed. Like that's the new frontier.
She told them to go back and to learn, like to define that. She said, go define this your economic perspective and this new economics, and the holistic economics, and then that's going to be, that's it. That's how, because she was saying that the Westerners wouldn't listen to their worldview. They wouldn't take them seriously in a sense, because it's their, because the Western worldview would not consider this other worldview as a real one, as complete, because they would say that it didn't fit into their worldview, so they were closed to any other worldview. But she said, but if you look at the economics and you're able to focus on that part and bring it over to them, they'll listen. They'll understand that this is different, that there are other perspectives. She was saying that that's where they can get their credibility, if they needed to get their credibility.
If they wanted to, right.
If they wanted to get credit, right. It's exactly. Not like, yeah, because again, why do I have to prove myself to another worldview?
True.
I don't know. I guess because that's the dominant one. Well, it's dominant because it's the aggressive one, I guess, but it's becoming outdated. Anyway, yeah, just something that I thought of, because it was all about like identity and just reflecting about your own self and how your own, what your own perceptions are, and how another person's perceptions are could be completely different than yours in your own view. But yeah, there was something else I was going to say about that.
It's almost like I'm getting to use this as an excuse to figure something else out in life.
That's what I'm taking it as. That's exactly what I'm taking it as. I'm like, okay, perfect. This is going to redirect things. I'm not sure if this internet thing is going to hold up forever. My job, like what else am I going to be able to do? We have other incomes coming in. Perfect. But what do I want to see long term? What am I doing now? So I'm taking it as like I'm like, oh, perfect. It's like my sabbatical to study.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And
yeah.
And I love this kind of scientific approach, because like they're into being collaborative, and they're into being, because it's like we're both smart people. We can contribute to things like this. We just have been told this narrative that you can't unless you're like like a Harvard dork guy, right. That's the only way you can, and that's it. But I don't think that's true anymore.
That's right. I don't think so either. And or like if you have a lot of money or something that you're at a certain level. I think everyone has something to contribute, always.
Yeah, and like everybody once they're explained it on, like, once they're explained how the big picture works, they understand all the parts that have been presented. They have their own perspective. Like everybody's going to have a new perspective, and like when you add all that together, you can build something new. That's right. It'll be greater than the sum of its parts. Complete synergy. Now we're learning. There you go. Greater than. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I heard that a lot. I mean, I've heard that okay, it's greater than the sum of its parts, but I never really was like, what does that exactly mean? But then now I have a clearer understanding of what that means. That's the synergy. That's, well, whatever it is, but I just had heard it. It's like equal to the sum of the parts. Okay, that makes sense to me. Greater than, that doesn't really make sense to me, but now it is a little clearer. Yeah, me too. I like that. I liked how they tied that together for me. I was like, oh, okay, cool.